Okay, so welcome into Philadelphia Walks PTSD. My name is Sharon Cole, or Sharon, or Cole, whatever you want to refer to me as. No big deal, in a good way. I don't care. I've been called rat, pig, horse, dog, cat, lizard, dinosaur would be among my favorites, possibly hippo and rhino. I don't know. So, whatever they mean to certain people from different groups who might have different meanings behind each word. Okay. So anyway, today is day 93 of my one video. Each day, 365-day raising money campaign, donor campaign, seeking out pockets big and small, short and tall, for a very, very serious situation which began all the way back the fourth Monday of January 2011. I was made to believe I'd be murdered in my apartment by a series of orchestrated events, and yes, it was orchestrated. A very severe situation unfolded after, as if that weren't enough. The games commenced, and every moron and idiot in the city of Philadelphia had to play along and do something dumb. And it's disturbing that in the place of the Constitution, this many people are willing to do whatever it is. So I try to bring up various examples of the 72,000 layer cake of harassment. Again, the fourth Monday of January 2011, I was made to believe I'd be murdered in my apartment, shaking, convulsing, trembling, trying to figure out what to do. I called my sister first. Then she convinced me, go ahead and try to call the police. And I was trapped in my apartment, bars on the windows, which adds to the whole idea of being in a prison or so forth and so on. And this in the city, it's very common to have bars on the front windows of anything that could look like a row home. It was converted to apartments. I had a bed that shook and trembled. And I would wake up wondering, this would be after the initial scare, but first I called my sister, then the police. I wondered if the call was even going to the police, because my brain was like, something's too wrong. It's too weird. What if my call's like being routed through some other agency into the CIA? That's how I actually felt. And they would send out fake cops. I actually believed that for a second. And the next day, when trying to call my mom, I got we're sorry, the number you're trying to reach has been disconnected. So that sounds like a death threat all around, which leads me to what I really want to talk about today, which is part of the blender process. And I feel like I was put through the blender, and in a way, I wonder how many people were kind of either part of the blender or somewhat put in the blender who are related to me. But anyway, because it's like, who wound up in what situation, and who's responsible for trying to chop a bunch of people up, for lack of a better word. And it is something I have actually see my situation as very concerning. There has been plenty of innuendo because these people play this weird psychological terror game and whistleblower harassment type game, where it's no-touch torture, death by 10,000 cuts. Or what if people actually did do certain things that could lead you into a very dangerous place, where you could wind up actually, harmed, killed, murdered, what have you. That first night I see as an actual death threat, but it was done so secretly and indirectly that there's no proof. And I just seem like someone like, oh, well, so there was a bunch of ruckus and this, that, and the other. There were a lot of things in place. But anyway, I'll get to the blender part. And here's what we'll say. During the first year was a very surreal experience after being terrorized. Of course, I do believe that it was so traumatizing that I wound up with PTSD. And I know that the brain does operate a certain way, but it doesn't account for people actually contributing to this blender experience. So here's part of it. I kept feeling like I had to participate in things or somehow quick find new friends, find a network to feel supported by. I didn't want to be alone in my apartment at all. I was afraid to be in my apartment. There was no way that I could move from my apartment. There weren't any really good options. I needed to keep working, working, working. And the idea, and I was a dog walker, so it wasn't like I could take off of work and take some sort of like disability leave or anything. Even if I worked somewhere, this idea of a disability leave, it would have been too traumatizing to even try to qualify for such a thing. That's another joke and a half. But anyway, at the time, all I knew to do was to keep working, keep working, keep working. There was nowhere else to go. And people kept giving me work. I came up to join in with all these different things, and I felt in retrospect, I know it was sort of a manipulation of energy. It's hard to explain, but I learned about this writer's workshop through a group called the First Person Arts. And I had used the First Person Arts before to get out some of my writing to see if my voice could be heard. And I actually did get to read for a salon series that they had back then. And this is a group known for giving people who usually don't have a voice. I learned about this workshop at their group, through their group. It was called Write Your Best Future Self. It was put on by a guy who was a TA for the positive psychology department over here at the University of Pennsylvania. And this is one of his projects. So anyway, before you were to take the class, you had to fill out a survey, and it would ask you questions like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? So forth and so on. So I'm not sure, why this was done unless it was part of an icebreaker, except it was private. You completed this on your laptop or whatever on your own. So when I show up to the class, right away I noticed that everyone in the group seemed to know something and I didn't, as if I were excluded from them having rallied around in a certain way to exchange information or to behave in a certain way or to raise up what I want to say, like topics or comments that could like instill fear in me. So one of those things would be when I was walking out of the first night of the class, the city was lit up in blue. Like a lot of the buildings were lit up in blue. And one of the guys who started the class, but he didn't finish the class, meaning say it was 8 weeks long. He only showed up for the first or second week and then he kind of dropped out. But he said something in such a way, he's like, oh, well, isn't it amazing? Isn't the blue so pretty, isn't it? Blue so pretty, he worded it in a way where it's like, I felt like he knew that I had answered a private questionnaire question with the answer of blue. And it made me wonder, did he know that I answered blue? And it wasn't like there were only two options, like blue or red. It was you actually just listed your favorite color. In addition, in that class, people would bring up things like there was a nurse from AI DuPont from Delaware. I happen to know that place because I'm from Delaware. And she would travel up here to Philadelphia or whatever. And she was with her husband, who was, get this, a priest or reverend or what have you for prisoners. And the scare tactics in my case made me feel as though people were going to put me in prison for some reason. Like they were going to make up some reason, or you have to be put in prison because, and crickets. Because it would be like, okay, I went to therapy. I talked about some stuff in therapy about things that happened, that I was trying to pull myself away from in childhood and stuff like that. And it would almost be like I'm punished for going to therapy and trying to unload all my baggage from childhood, because it did actually oppress me and block me from being able to advance in life. Because I would wonder, like, what is holding me down? I knew that there was a blockage. So it had to be sort of teased out and worked out or what have you. But anyway, one of the things that came up was Park City, Utah, which is interesting because these days, I know there was a case, the ski case with Gwyneth Paltrow, but that aside, Park City came up from this AI DuPont woman. And she kept saying Park City, Park City. And of course, we had this reverend who was her husband, who would go in to talk to prisoners to keep them having the faith and stuff like that. And the fear that got instilled in me was, oh no, like I talked about or told on per se in a roundabout kind of way, that there were people who I worked with while at Whole Foods who were playing games way back in the day. And it would be like, God, I can't come out of my apartment without one of these people sort of lurking around and playing a game. Like, ooh, it's like these people are like all over the place. They're like little goblins. And there was someone who I actually liked, but I did notice that there was something weird going on. I think this person was a small time pot dealer at the time and quite popular. But the Park City reference made me think of that person. And I thought, oh my God, did he wind up getting in trouble? I wound up leaving Whole Foods because it got too crazy. Like I could actually, like at some point, witness a vortex of energy. It's hard to explain. Um, it's every once in a while it pops up and it's like, what is that? Because I don't want to see it. It's like being on the other side of the curtain and I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. It's weird. I don't believe it's actually like a mental, it could be put on someone like, oh, you must have a paranoid. I think it can be induced or created. So they completely renovated the Whole Foods where I worked, and I'm wondering if the same thing can never happen again, like it did before. So a lot of places have been totally redone, gutted out, and I'm wondering, or relocated. Because the places where I went, I'm wondering how rigged the energy is. I am so not kidding. I'm so not kidding. And the city is a matrix full of energy lines and electricity and lights. And what if it can be harnessed, that energy, and used to freak people out, or to create, induce, or make it seem like someone has a mental illness per se? I have researched and looked into and considered everything because I'm like, I don't know what it is, and I don't know why these people keep showing up in creepy ways, and making it seem like they know where I am all the time. And in a way, they're stalkers. Then I was like, are they using some sort of? I looked up system stuff that people normally in the emergency response groups would use, or security or investigative services, but I found out there's these things called RSS or ATIX. And these things can be used to it's like GPS, so you could locate someone through these things. Now, there's plenty of people who are not that fabulous who work in fields where they're supposed to be security officers, or they're supposed to be, so they could have access to things and then play around with it. I started to wonder, like, there's a huge field of criminal justice, and some people you like, and some people you're like, you're kidding. You're kidding. That's scary. So anyway, just saying, these people put you through a blender. So even in the first person arts uh, workshop that was offered in 2011 by this guy who seemed like a nice guy, technically they put me through a blender because I was wondering why this thing happened, why the world went crazy, why everything went wacky Wednesday and turned upside down, and why I was being scared constantly by people like, oh, we're going to put you in jail. We're going to put you in jail. We're going to do. And I was like, for what? I was actually living my own life. And say like at Whole Foods, if I were to talk to human resources or kind of say like, I don't know what to do because these people are acting bizarrely. I don't know if they're on drugs or not because it's Whole Foods, the food industry, you know what I mean. And people don't behave like themselves when they're on drugs. It's not really them. They're almost a non-person. Sorry to say that. I know there are people who, they can come out of, I had a neighbor who came out of rehab and I was like, wow, it's so much better having a conversation with this person than it was before. Wow, night and day. So people don't behave like themselves when they're on drugs, and they could start to behave in a hurtful, harmful, very disturbing way. And I'm wondering if these people got too little excited with shrooms or pot or what have you. I'm incredibly liberal, and I'm talking about Whole Foods because I was wondering why they were coming around like, oh, Sharon's coming out of her apartment. We're going to come around the corner really quick. Oh, I'm out. And I'm thinking, out of what? Like, what do you mean? And that they do that. They like to confuse you by leaving, like you're on a cliffhanger of, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean? And they play these games. Or maybe people send 2 text messages on purpose because you're alone. So that's another game. You'd be surprised who plays that one. Now, I know sometimes it can happen through phones, and you're like, oh, somehow a duplicate's coming up. That's what one would assume until you start to realize People might do it on purpose. They exploit the fact that you're alone. I'm with someone. I'll send two of the same text message. That's a tactic also. But anyway, see how the blender, it goes out like spider web tentacles, whatever. People have so many ways of doing this, but Park City, Utah, and a prison guard or a prison priest, if you will, this scared me because it made me feel like, are they going to try to like get me into some sort of weird entanglement or like make me look like some sort of criminal or what have you? And I mean, everything came up from a bomb, car bomb terrorist to an environmental terrorist because I started to think about green juicing and stuff, and I was like, I don't want to sound like an environmental terrorist and someone who's so like to the extreme. Which, in fact, they did arrest a whole bunch of people down in Atlanta recently because of the police city, I think, that's being created. But see, they were willing to throw Molotov cocktails or what have you. Pedophilia. I had little girl barrettes put around my apartment and along my walks all the time. And this is something where I experienced some people while growing up who were technically they fall into the definition of rapists and very concerning behavioral people who handle things a certain way or live life a certain way, and it's disturbing that that's very normalized for people, even people who seem to be doing well, and they have families and wives and kids, and they can look good, have a lot of money, and technically they're what a personality. If the FBI were to do a profile on some people who I grew up with, technically they would be a concern, but they look good enough. They look way better enough to pass through the generic radar of people who don't know any better. So anyway, let me see what else I want to say. Oh, I know that the moderator of this class, this guy, I know his emails, it was like Rob something, but it was REB was part of his email. And Reb is also a Jewish or rabbi reference. So that came up as like part of something that I kept trying to figure out about, like part of the puzzle. But he said while teaching this workshop class, he talked about a story of he and his new wife or fiance or girlfriend were trying to travel over the holidays one year, and they were all excited. They had it all timed out or planned or what have you. Like, okay, we're supposed to be here at this time. We're supposed to be here at this time. They had their itinerary. And I don't know if it was due to bad weather or other things, but their plane got delayed and this, that, and the other. And he kind of suggested to everyone in the room, just plan on things not working out as smoothly as they used to maybe when you grew up. So when you grew up, there were rarely plane delays. You just, other than weather, but could there be wrenches thrown into people's lives for other reasons, to sort of mess up the bad guys? Like, I did feel that way from him. Like, he was trying to suggest, like, just take everything with a grain of salt and don't get too stuck on plans, because sometimes plans have to be mixed up in order to outdo people who aren't being cool. So I did get that from him, even though I didn't always think that everybody was cool in the class, because there were a few times when we would group up together and work on, say, like a special scenario or work in teams, and I felt like he was watching for my reaction. And I'm wondering who knew in advance that I was scared out of my apartment, and who knew, like, we have to now. I kind of feel like the FBI or people who are part of certain groups or agencies swarmed around either to find something out about things that might have been going on prior. Because leading up to 2011, there was some activity that for some reason my brain kept compartmentalizing it and putting it in another category. Like, I'll have to go find work over here. I'll have to go do this. Like, I didn't really, somehow my brain didn't totally bring it to the forefront, but whoa, 2011 brought all that stuff right to the forefront. And it's almost as if the city or whoever set this up wanted to bring out all the people who play a certain goblin game. It can get worse than that, though. I know there's people on the streets who pop up and this, that, and the other. I've tried to work in places where they use Rocket Chat or Slack for communications, which is a text type system on uh, that you can download to your phone. It's outside of, technically, it would be like an app outside of like normal texting on your phone. So Albadia Real Estate in New York City, they came to me through Indeed. I had my resume out there on Indeed.com, and they behaved very strangely. And I kept hanging on, thinking, well, they offered a fairly decent pay. I need to get paid. I'll keep jumping through the hoops that they want me to jump through. But at some point, I was like, this is ridiculous. But I went so far as to document, screenshot, and save everything in case it should ever come up that I can sort of like. I did call the DA's office in New York City about this company, but they would have different people pop up through Rocket Chat saying, "Oh, that's silly. You can't do that. Oh, we need you to open a bank account. We're going to do payment processing through cryptocurrency. We need to do this." And then someone from another department, "Oh, no, she has it wrong. You need to do that." It got really like all these little faces keep popping up on Rocket Chat, and it became like some sick, disturbing joke. I actually did report them to the DA's office, but they have to have a valid address in the city uh, where you call the DA. I assumed that they actually have an address in New York City because it's Google verified. I don't know about anything else. So I don't know what to believe. I can call them again, but it gets exhausting to keep trying to find justice and to not get a response. I worked at a yoga studio also. They used Slack. I worked there to get free yoga, and they also happened to pay. And they chatted through Slack, but I realized, again, a group or ring of people using communications in such a way to sort of gang up, plan, manipulate, do this, that, and the other. And they kind of knew I was desperate for hours and money. And it started to become a game to them. It was very high schoolish, to be honest. Um, one of my tasks would be to roll up eye towels and put them in a container that had like a lavender. You would add lavender scent, and there was a very specific way to roll these towels so that a certain amount of towels would fit in there. And this would be high school mean girl tactics, or very childish. But someone came. The manager came along and said, "Oh, you don't have to. You can turn the towels this way. So like, just turn it this way." So I was like, okay, I'll roll them that way, whatever. It doesn't really matter in the end. The point is, towels are available to hand out during class. Later, someone would have to go onto, and I screenshotted for evidence. I screenshot everything at this point. And I don't do anything wrong to anybody. So there might be people saying, well, go ahead. I don't do the only thing I do is react to people hurting me, and it would be obvious that I would be like yelling down the street in self-defense at someone who's being a jerk. So, and jerk is a very light term to use for these people. But so whole thing came out on Slack. Who's putting the towels in this way? That's the wrong way. They had to take pictures of how to correctly roll the towels, how to put it. They turned it into a whole bitch fest, if you will. I didn't bite. It's sort of like throwing bait out there and trying to reel someone in. But, between my Satellite 35 handler or advisor, if you will, and my own brain, it's like, don't play into it because it's a setup and it's a dumb one. And these people actually are high school level at best. So anyway, and that's, I'm in a position now where I know people are behaving stupidly and dumbly, but if you're attacked by an entire community or communities, and we're talking, I don't know how many different groups of people participated. Even the Blockley out in West Philly, which isn't open any longer, but it would be a popular place to go. A lot of UPenn students went there. A lot of locals from West Philly went there to see like the Brazilian drum corps and everything. And here's a kicker: a couple people who I knew and I considered kind of friends from having volunteered with women's groups and everything. They're like, "You want to go out to the Blockley, blah, blah." Well, over at the Blockley, on the playlist, they actually played the First Person Arts complaint choir song. I can't think of the melody right now, but my mind was in such a space of I was This was after 2011 kicked off. So I was kind of in this mode of like, I want to keep trying to figure out how to hang out with people and still try to be as normal as possible. But one of the people who is a female to male transitioning person, who used to go by Caroline, she's like, "Oh, oh my God, do you recognize this song? You recognize this song?" At that instant, I kind of didn't, because there was a lot going on. This was during the intermission after the drum corps sort of took a break. And it was the complaint choir, first person arts complaint choir song. I participated in the complaint choir song group for fun, because it was put out there as a funny, silly thing. Let's complain about all the dog poop on the streets, all the potholes on the streets, all the, Philly has a lot left to be desired. It is a very hurting city, to be honest, unless you're incredibly wealthy and you get to hang out with fabulous groups all the time, who are respectful. But in general, this is a very victimized city. There's a lot of, I don't know what to say. Philly is a very disturbed and hurting city. And I would love to live somewhere else if I had the money and knew where to go. I don't have connections in a lot of places. But I don't know what to say. So with that said, they actually played that song, and this is something that comes up. So there's a connection between the Blockley and University of Pennsylvania and First Person Arts, which now is run by someone else. It's, a lot of people switched out. So there are a lot of organizations that I was hooked up with, either through volunteering, interning, or having been recognized by, or what have you, for writing. And all the executive directors have retired or moved on, and new people are in those positions. Entire addresses have been changed, including the address system down where my mom and aunt lived. They switched off from Turkey Scratch or Lot 311 on Quail Court to 8534 Northwest 40th Terrace. That's a major change. So all of 99% of my dog walking clients moved. Once I left and went to Florida, everybody moved to different addresses. Some stayed within the city, some people didn't. So they either try to erase what they did and make it harder to prove. I don't know what they do, or they start anew with a new target. I have no idea. Hopefully there's no one out there running around. But anyway, this is a long one, but an important one. It's taken me a long time, but I'm in a position now where it's a little bit easier to think of how to document, screenshot, take a video of, or what have you, things that happen. I do have emails from the past from people who behaved very poorly through emails, even people who need to seem assertive or bitchy or take me off your list. Now, if someone you knew who was a very good person, who's incredibly hurting, and it's clear that something really bad happened to this person, and you send a GoFundMe link, would you say, remove me from the list? Or most people who are halfway human would just be like, hey, you can privately roll your eyes. I totally get it. Like, oh God, it's another GoFundMe. Or just sort of stick it in the spam folder or whatever. There are ways to control and handle such things, but if you have to act like this, as if, and these people know, if I sent you a GoFundMe link, you already know what was going on. Okay, so have a great day. Thank you so much, and be careful out there. Tomorrow's begins sort of a Trump storm, if you will, and Passover and Easter, all of the planets aligning for whatever's about to go on starting tomorrow. So Passover starts this week, and Easter Sunday is next Sunday. Interesting, because the Jewish calendar operates on a lunar calendar, so Passover and Easter don't always align into the same time period. So an interesting alignment going on right now, and I don't know if people operate by the moon, the sun, the solar system, timing, clocks, what have you, but some would say it is kind of a perfect storm again. Okay, thank you. And the weather has been totally crazy in other parts of the city. Here, we've kind of lucked out, if you see it that way and didn't want any snow. Okay, thank you so much, and have a great day.